His campaign so far has been a mixed bag, to put it mildly, but former Vice President Joe Biden is back up to a double-digit lead over his fellow 2020 Democrats. Biden took in 29% of Democratic support in a new poll commissioned by CNN, which also has Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren neck and neck for a distant second and third place with 15% and 14% respectively. And then there is Senator Kamala Harris, who had enjoyed a surge after this very memorable debate moment.
There was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
But apparently that bump is no more. The new poll has Harris down 12 points since then to 5%, now tied for fourth place with South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And no matter what you think about the horse race, polls like this one do have some pretty tangible consequences this time around, with new rules from the Democratic National Committee requiring candidates get at least 2% support in at least 4 national polls to qualify for the next round of debates. Joining me to discuss are Boston City Councilor Lydia Edwards and John Walsh, former campaign manager for Governor Deval Patrick, chairman of the Massachusetts Democratic Party, and the founder and principal of Walsh Strategies. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
We should stress at the outset that neither one of you has committed to backing a particular Democrat at this point in time, right? You're not doing it publicly or secretly or anything,
Right.
so you're dispassionate observers. Let me start by asking you, I know it's really early. I know it is a national poll as opposed to a state-specific poll, but I was blown away that Joe Biden has actually been getting stronger over the last couple of weeks as opposed to weaker. Let's take a look at some of the numbers from the poll. Just more detail. He does better with Democrats than independents, according to CNN's poll. He also does better with older voters rather than younger voters, and he does better with voters who identify as conservative or moderate than who identify as liberal. Let me start by asking you, is that a recipe for success for the Democrat who ends up getting the nomination in 2020, to have more enthusiasm with those groups than the groups that don't love him? Lydia, what do you think?
I'm genuinely concerned about that. I see a schism actually in the party that's generational, that's looking at, the line of liberal and progressive growing further and further apart. And so I really do wonder if a concentration of that support is going to actually be able to help the Democratic Party take back the White House. None of those polls actually surprise me in terms of his skewing towards older voters or the fact that more conservative or moderate Democrats support him. But it's a real concern when there's a movement and the excitement and the inspiration seems to be with folks like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren.
John, do you agree with the councilor's assessment that this is worrisome?
Yeah, I don't think so. Joe Biden is one of the most fragile frontrunners I've ever seen, and that doesn't come from his poll numbers because, honestly, I appreciate that's a piece of data we can talk about, but these kind of polls, if you intend to ride the polar coaster, have your air sickness bag with you for the next couple of months because these polls are going to come all over the place. But I think it does fairly reflect that Joe Biden is better known and more comfortable to many voters, and particularly the voters that are highlighted there.
You talk about him being exceptionally fragile. The reason that I was so surprised to see his numbers strengthening as opposed to weakening, it's not just the struggles in the debates, which we all know about and have talked about, the gaffes that he's made over the course of the last month. He got the location of the El Paso and Dayton shootings wrong. He confused Theresa May with Margaret Thatcher, which he's done a couple times. He had that awkward comment about children of color versus white children and which ones learn better and which ones don't. He had to sort of back away from his formulation there. He attributed a Martin Luther King quote to Barack Obama, and then he had this to say about the Parkland shooting.
I watched what happened when the kids from Parkland marched up to, and I met with them, and then they went off to up on the hill when I was vice president. They went off the hill to go into those neighborhoods. All those congressmen were like, "No, I'm not here. I'm not here."
And of course, he wasn't vice president when that shooting happened. What is going on with Joe Biden? I feel like I don't want to pretend I'm a doctor, but I want to say what's going on with him cognitively, that he's making mistake after mistake after mistake. Or I shouldn't make you answer a medical question.
Right.
How problematic is it to have a candidate who every other time they speak, say something that then has to be walked back?
I don't know. You could be the President of the United States. I mean, honestly, the standard for gifts or mistakes or being flustered has really come down a lot in terms of the ability to get away with or win despite saying something. So I think we as the American public are almost exhausted by the fact that we keep pointing to the fact that someone made a mistake. It demonstrates that he's human. He's talking like a lot of Americans. I don't know that it's really hurting him.
When you say he's exceptionally fragile, do you share Lydia's take on the concern or lack thereof that these mistakes create?
Well, I think everybody makes mistakes. I remember, so Lydia is much younger than me, but I remember it sort of snowballed on Jerry Ford, who was an All-American athlete, that he was clumsy, right? Those kind of things, once you're looking for them, they're all over the place, and every candidate does them. And let's say a couple of wonderful things about Joe Biden as a person and a family man, all that stuff. But I'm also old enough to remember this is not the first time he's run for president, and he has not been particularly good at running for president any of those times, and he wasn't that old then. He was a fabulous vice president and a good family man. I think he's had a distinctly mixed record as a legislator that maybe reflects the times he was coming in. But I don't think that it's Joe's too old to do this. I just don't think he's the candidate that's going to lead us to a victory. That's my own opinion. I think we are at a generational shift moment, and I think if we embrace that, we'll be successful. If we don't, we'll be in a battle.
Well, let's turn with that to Elizabeth Warren, because I don't want to make this an all Joe Biden segment. Mm-hmm. Could she be a generational shift candidate? Because she's of a similar vintage to the vice president.
Right, but not of the same experience and not of the same track record. I mean, she wasn't there in '94 for the crimes bill. She doesn't have the same baggage that some of us would consider the other candidates do, who are of the same age as her. So I think she does bring a unique kind of fresh voice, and I enjoy hearing her plans. I enjoy hearing that she's thinking about these things in ways that I don't think the other candidates are, and that could bridge possibly a generational shift, because you're thinking she's fresh, she's new, she's coming with new things and can adapt in ways that maybe people don't think that Joe Biden or Bernie can.
At the risk of making you guys roll your eyes and viewers at home roll their eyes because you think I'm accentuating the negative, I want to ask you about Warren bringing up, once again, her claims of Native American ancestry. She was speaking at a presidential forum on Native American issues in Iowa, and she had this to say the other day.
I know that I have made mistakes. I am sorry for harm I have caused. I have listened and I have learned a lot. And I am grateful for the many conversations that we've had together.
John Walsh, what is she doing bringing this up again, especially right on the heels of the president kind of luxuriating, fantasizing about how he's going to make fun of her as, quote-unquote, Pocahontas if she's the nominee? Well, why now?
I think right now because she's addressing a group of Native Americans.
Yes.
I think that Elizabeth Warren's heritage and her handling of her heritage are inconsequential to who she would be as president, and I suspect for the campaign as well. I think she's wise. I would agree with her that maybe she didn't handle it the best way, and the best way to acknowledge a mistake is to acknowledge it. But to answer your first question, Elizabeth Warren definitely could be a candidate for generational shift because her eyes are on the future, not in the rearview mirror, and that's what we need. And any analysis of the campaigns of any of these people, Elizabeth Warren is running one of the best campaigns.
What's the joke on Twitter and social media that she has a plan for everything? She truly does have a plan for everything. Today was criminal justice, if I believe that, and you can't keep up with them because they just come nonstop. Let's talk positively about Warren a little more, accentuate the good rather than the bad. There's a new poll that came out, I think, around a week ago, 5 days ago, that shows her actually leading in Iowa by 11 points. She's at 20%, according to Change Research. Biden and Sanders are at 17. Am I right to think of this as more important than national polls that show Biden up or Biden slipping or Kamala Harris fading? Like, this is an important early voting state where she spent a lot of time, and that's an impressive margin. Big deal, right?
It's a good deal, but again, it's so early that, to really wage which poll is most important at this stage is nice, but it's also not as pressing, I think.
You sound like a politician who's actually run for office trying to get those of us in the media who hyperventilate about this stuff.
About every little thing, right? And so I think at this point, and just to answer your question about her talking in front of the Native Americans and she did the right thing. And I think that's just point blank. She did the right thing. She had caused some injury, caused people to doubt, I think, some parts of her character. Why would you put something down if you don't think it's true, or did you do it for something, for some sort of advantage? And she just outright said, it was wrong. I apologize for who I hurt. And I think that speaks to her character and the fact that, yeah, she is human too. We do make mistakes, and the ability for folks to be able to come forward and say, that was a mistake and I can do better, is something that I think a lot of people really do want more from their politicians, including Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders. They want to see them say, this was in the past, I've learned, and I can move on.
And that was a full-throated apology as opposed to, if I offended you, then I'm sorry. Was she actually?
Or I'm sorry you felt that way.
Right, another classic. We have only about 20 seconds left. Kamala Harris's slide, are you guys surprised that after this big surge that she's dropping off with, early, but big decline after big gains?
I don't see the poll numbers as a suggestion of her slide.
Okay.
I think that the idea that there was the one moment in a debate would cause a significant difference. What's really important is that how they're running their campaigns on the ground. I don't have any way to evaluate that with Kamala, but I think that's what I would be trying to figure out.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. John Walsh, Councilor Lydia Edwards, thank you both.